Hi, welcome to Head Start, the podcast for race directors and the business of putting on races. Building a race from the ground up, as anyone who's done it will know, is a tough business. But what about planning, coordinating and growing a whole series of races, all with a common theme and brand identity? How do you finance and grow multiple races from scratch? How do you choose when and where to launch a new race? And how can you make use of local delivery partners to deliver new races on a budget while ensuring your quality standards and vision are adhered to? Well, that's what we'll be discussing today with my guest, Sam Hewitt. As the co-founder of UltraX, the multi-stage ultra-marathon World Series, Sam has been at the forefront of one of the fastest-growing race series concepts of the last few years. And with his help, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the benefits and challenges of setting up a race series from scratch, including the constant strive for brand consistency, the process of cross-pollinating ideas and small successes between events, and some of the difficulties of coordinating equipment, staff, and sponsorship sales across multiple event locations. Even if building a race series is something that hasn't been on your radar so far, there's many lessons in today's discussion on scaling up race concepts across time and space that would appeal to you whatever stage in your race directing career you find yourself in. So stick around for a very interesting discussion. And before we get into this amazing episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our amazing podcast sponsor, Run Sign Up, race directors' favorite all-in-one technology solution for endurance and fundraising events. More than 28,000 in-person, virtual, and hybrid events use Run Sign Up's free and integrated solution to save time, grow their events, and raise more. And we'll be hearing a bit more from this great company a little later in the podcast. But now, let's dive into our discussion on building a race series with UltraX's Sam Hewitt. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and taking the time from your very busy schedule. Usually, you would be joining from somewhere quite exotic, but not today.
Not today. I'm in southwest London, and it's a little bit chilly and a bit wintry, and I wish I was somewhere exotic.
Well, you were telling me that the rest of your team is in Morocco, preparing for your inaugural UltraX Morocco race. Quite strong showing as well, 250 participants for your first event. And you're not going, you're not joining them.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and always still feels a bit funny. We're 5 years in now, and I've probably missed 3 events over that period. But this year, had I been at every single event before there were any, trail clubs or, Sunday run with some of our ambassadors or thing like that, that was 26 weekends. And I think both me and my other co-founder are very conscious about making sure we look after ourselves, look after, relationships with loved ones and families, and maintain our own energy levels. Because, whilst honestly, I would love to be at every single event this year, I am conscious of the impact it has on energy and then the kind of lag it has the following period. And I think, we're lucky enough to have a very good team, and I trust them to kind of get on with things and deliver a great event without me. And actually, I think the more we grow, it becomes more and more important for us to be able to say, actually, I'm not going to be there. You go and deliver this event yourself. So it's kind of partially looking after myself and looking after the team, but also partially with the kind of years in the future in mind as well.
So it's interesting that we're sort of like hitting the ground running here, because we're going to be spending quite a lot of time in this episode discussing all aspects of putting on a series and sort of doing a number of events throughout the year. And you're already touching on something that wasn't even on my list, which is the physical toll it takes on you, the race director, and your relationships, and, just having to sacrifice quite a lot of your personal time for this, seeing as most races happen over the weekend, right?
Yeah. It's pretty much always the weekend. There's pretty much always a few days either side. And, it's incredibly all consuming, regardless of how much preparation and planning you do. You are on for that 24, 48, 72 hours. And even the shorter events, we now have quite a range. We have 1-day events and we have 5-day events. The shorter events are, incredibly, because they're just such long days and such intense days, and you're kind of always running around. And yeah, they really do take their toll. But I think, there's there's the energy side, but also there's the kind of, I guess, the kind of admin side, because, with a, growing business or a growing event series, you have one week where you're fully concentrated on that event, and you come back and not only are you knackered, not only have you got, social stuff to catch up with, but also you haven't done any admin for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And you've got a ton of emails catching up with you onto the next one. So, yeah, it's definitely important to be aware of the toll, that the events can take on you. And I think be kind of proactive about making sure that you're looking after yourself and your team.
Yeah, indeed. And yet you chose this. So how did that happen? Tell us a little bit about Ultra X. Lots of people in the UK predominantly, because you are a UK-based company, would be aware of you. Lots of people in the ultra marathoning side of things would be aware of you. But for the rest of our listeners who aren't, do you want to give us maybe like a quick summary of the Ultra X story?
Yeah. I mean, there's a kind of a long story and a short story, but a short story is that I stumbled into the multi-stage ultra marathon space completely by accident when I was quite young for people in the sport. I was 22, and it was supposed to be a scratch, which I, did this challenge and then kind of moved on and got on with my life. And I had just the most amazing experience doing this event, but found it quite frustrating that so many of the conversations I had around this event would be met with, I could never do that. It's not for me. When I just loved it. So I guess Ultra X was founded because we wanted to encourage more people to take on multi-stage ultramarathons specifically, but more generally big challenges. And I was training as an accountant and not particularly happy in that role, looking for something to do on my own. And I guess the passion kind of met what I thought was a bit of an opportunity, because I saw this, space, this trail running space, this adventure space seeming to grow before me. So I had the love of it and I had the passion, but also I was like, there's actually a rational kind of backing towards potentially making the leap. So yeah, 5 years ago, Jamie's the other co-founder, made the decision to create Ultra X. And we now have, 14 different multi-stage events next year, and are kind of continuing to grow, and put on these events and encourage more and more people to get involved in the sport that we love.
Indeed. And we should say that most of these events, and obviously, growing a race like that, which is ultra marathons, even multi-stage ones, and I know you want to be growing the sport much more than that, but, there's still, like a specific pocket of the industry that attracts a certain amount of people. How many participants are the events up to right now? The sort of the more mature events or the newer events? I think I was reading on LinkedIn, one of your posts the other day, that the Morocco one that you're putting on this weekend is going to be 250 people plus.
Yeah, so there is a big range, because we now have quite a diverse offering. So 5-stage events is kind of our bread and butter, and that's really what the brand is all about. But we only have 4 5-stage events, and they're generally up to 150, 200 people. But then we also have a number of 2-stage events, which are larger and also open up the final day usually. So the final day is a 50-kilometer standalone ultra for those people that might not want to spend a night in a tent and can just come and participate. And they're typically 250 plus, 200 plus. The largest we've had is about 500, 550. And we have also organized a couple of single stage events in the past before, and they're in the high 700, 800s. And this year could be up to 1,000 on one of them.
So it's interesting. So the format is, the core format is multi-stage ultramarathon events, always in amazing exotic locations, which I guess is like sort of like the whole selling point here. But you also, which is, I guess, quite smart, you also use the last day of the multi-stage as a standalone event for the people who are more used to the traditional sort of like short ultra marathon type distance.
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually something we spent a lot of time deliberating over at the beginning, because for us, it's all about the multi-stage format, and it is slightly different when you go into single stage. But I think we eventually kind of got over it with the idea that actually, if we can really champion the multi-stage competitors and bring in these new type of people to the event, show them what a multi-stages event is like, and actually then you might be encouraging them to come back the following year and do a 2-stage event. But also by bringing, a few more people into a race, because actually at the end of the day, two-stage events are generally slightly less popular than, the single stage ones.
So I've been meaning to do an episode on race series for a while, and I was looking for a good guest for that, because I think there's something special about planning and executing and growing and scaling up a series as such, as opposed, for instance, to just organically growing a portfolio of races, which lots of race directors do. There's lots of people in the US in particular who have races that happen mostly to be in the same location or in the same general kind of area, but don't necessarily share a brand or other common components in them. And I just wanted to focus on what growing the series aspects of things looks like, and the pros and many cons, as we see. And I think we've discussed in the past of trying to grow a series. There's lots of benefits that come from the single branding and the single everything type thing. But there's also some things that go against it, which actually I didn't expect. And it's quite interesting to go into those. So with that in mind, going back to the earliest days of Ultra X, because that is always a very interesting point in time for me when I'm speaking with race directors, particularly people who say, oh, I saw this opportunity and basically, I started this kind of thing. To me, maybe I'm a little bit more risk averse. Looking around when you started out, maybe like a few years back, I would have thought that, with Xterra, with UTMB, with lots of great adventure, exotic ultras all over the place, but basically the market would be quite done with that kind of event. And obviously, you've been proven correct so far with the success of Ultra X, that there was something there with multi-stage ultras in particular. Sort of walk us through a little bit through that light bulb moment, and that we need to do a race series around this concept kind of conclusion. How did that happen?
The concept behind the series came from my own personal experience, but also speaking with other people who'd done the event. And firstly, there were a few well-known multi-stage organizers in the world. You mentioned Xterra and UTMB, but those are very specifically, single stage ultra and very focused on the race element. We were quite focused on the adventure element. And I think, probably the best known is Marathon des Sables. And there's a couple other similar to that, but they were generally really well organized. People loved them, but they were standalone events, which I really thought missed an opportunity, because you had an amazing experience, you had an amazing adventure, but actually the whole thing about an adventure is you don't quite know what you're going to expect. And there was no part of me that wanted to go back to the Sahara to do an event again. So I thought, hang on, if we can, these events you're creating, they're really kind of community focused. They make you want to go back. They're addictive. So why are these events not offering the customers, the participants, another format? So I thought there was a big opportunity there. I thought that for the events there where there were series, the branding could have been much better, and it wasn't very clear of the pathway. And then I think, the third thing for us was we thought the industry, and this might have slightly been in hindsight, beginner's ignorance, but our view was that some of the race organizers had got a little fat. And in that respect, I mean, these events had very much grown from grassroots, and suddenly 15, 20 different people had got involved, and everyone was kind of taking a cut, and they were just very expensive. And, I came from a kind of a finance background, and I just thought, actually, I could create this event, which was still really high quality, just being quite efficient. And I could offer a similar experience for massively reduced price on, what Marathon des Sables is, or one of Beyond the Ultimate or something like that. Which was really important because actually I wanted to attract a type of person that wasn't, a 45-year-old person earning a lot of money. I wanted to attract a 25-year-old who could actually afford that with their annual holiday allowance or whatever. So yeah, that was kind of the initial thought process, and the idea that by creating a series specifically, an accessible series, the value we would gain would be from kind of attracting customers and then making the business model work based on the lifetime competitor value, rather than just having this kind of one hit cycle where you kind of churn through competitors.
So I guess implicit in that is the assumption that people will keep coming back, that basically a participant who does one of your races in Jordan would then go back and do another one of your races in the US or somewhere else, right? So, which I guess, how much did you put that assumption to the test? Or was it one of those, like many, when people, like start a business, which is more of a gut thing, and then you just test it as you go along? Did you ask around? Did you basically poll people to see if that's sort of how they felt? How much did you scrutinize that assumption?
We definitely didn't do anything as analytical or as data orientated as a poll. Sadly, we probably should in hindsight, but there was a lot of gut. There was a lot of conversations with people in the space. And we also did organize. So we had a little bit of a data set in that Jamie and I had organized this event in Jordan, prior to Ultra X, which was a part of the story I actually missed out earlier, prior to Ultra X Jordan, which was called the Wadi Rum Ultra, which was, 20 odd people, for 2 years or 3 years. And so we had a group of people who'd done this event who we could kind of, throw ideas around with, who we were all, really good friends with and close with and spoke to kind of on a monthly basis. So it was really their initial feedback. But it was a small sample and a lot of it was based on gut. And yeah, I feel like sometimes with these things, you've just got to make a bit of a leap. And actually, if we'd done a load of research and had got the wrong answer, we'd have probably still gone ahead with it.
Indeed. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But was there some kind of business plan involved at the beginning? Did you put something sort of like on paper with assumptions and, like how many races you want to be doing in your first year, in your third year, in your fifth year? What did that look like?
Yeah, we spent a long we launched at the back end of 2018, but after Wadi Rum Ultra in 2017, pretty much 2 weeks after it, which was October, we started building a business plan. So we actually spent a year kind of in conversations with potential partners in potential race locations, building out budgets, building out, assumptions and forecasts, and like seeing how this could work. Because as I say, at this stage, we were both working and we both left our jobs in summer 2019. And I don't think either of us would have felt confident enough to do that. I mean, we still took a year, with nothing, living on, Jamie's parents' sofa for it, proper cliche startup, but, on the back of that, but we had to kind of have a model which we both believed would work, even if the assumptions were based on very little other than gut, just to kind of, get ourselves over the line and, give a bit of confidence.
Yeah. And of course, summer 2019, what a wonderful time to be quitting your job and starting an events business, right?
Yeah, sorry. It was actually summer. It was November 2018. So we actually had 1 year, 2019, where actually we hit our business plan. We did everything we were planning to. And we were all set to kind of, grow the team a little bit. There was only 2 of us for the first year, grow the team a little bit and kind of invest a bit more in, creating everything we wanted to, for 2020. But then, yeah, exactly. You know what comes around the corner, and, the plan changed.
What was the plan in terms of how many races you would do? Because the plan was to build out a series. So what did it look like in terms of what you then thought feasible in terms of growth rates? How many races per year?
So for the first 3 years, we had 3 events in 2019, 3 5-stage events. We're looking to add 2 more each year for the next 3 years. And we're also, in hindsight, this is very punchy, but we're looking to double the attendance in each year for the first 3 years. But we're starting very small. And that was going to be a mixture of full distance and also kind of half distance, so weekend events, which we have actually more of now. But that was kind of always in the plan, to have a kind of mixture of them. And then it was kind of to see where we were in 3 years time and review. I think planning so far in advance when we hadn't done anything like this before was, probably just a bit of a waste of time.
And the brand, which I guess is another very important aspect of all this, how much thinking went into that as you were starting out?
A lot. Everything I remember we spent like half a day on the color. We had like a flip chart of all the colors of all the brands in the space. Iron Man, UTMB, Xterra, everything in kind of endurance. And we kind of, we noticed there was a lot of yellow and a lot of red and a lot of black and a lot of quite aggressive, quite inaccessible color schemes. So we found a nice gap. I think there was a bit of a conversation about having pink. But we went for blue in the end, light blue, which is neutral, accessible, kind of in line with everything we wanted. We had a previous kind of logo / brand from the Wadi Rum Ultra, which we kind of filtered in with the Running Man. And yeah, somewhere I've got a list of all the different names we had before Ultra X, but some of them were awful. But yeah, we spent a long time on, how we were going to make it look, the visuals, and then also the kind of things we kind of want to stand for. And actually, it's funny, looking back, a lot's changed over the last 5 years. If I look at the kind of tactics and the specific delivery and the events we've done and the locations and the team, but actually, in terms of what Ultra X is in 2 lines, and in terms of the values, that's not changed since day one. And I think that is because we spent so much time, in coffee shops and in bedrooms, like just, charting ideas down and discussing and speaking with our community, even that though is a small one, and working out kind of what we wanted to do and what this stood for. And yeah, I think it's made a really big difference, and it's helped us in a lot of our decision making when we've got to, crossroads or the plans changed. We can say, okay, does this align with what we set out? And that makes life a lot easier.
That is such an important thing, actually. It's something that I discussed in the past in a previous episode I did with Peter Abraham, who's a bit of a kind of like branding expert. And he completely opened up my eyes to the whole importance of brand. It's so easy at the early stage that you guys were, where you had like 1,000,001 things to do, to just try and rush the whole branding thing. And of course, brand is not just the logo. Brand is so many elements that go into everything that sort of the business and the race kind of is supposed to represent. But it would have been so easy to just, like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, why are we spending 2 days on the color here? There's more important things to look at. But it is such a guiding star because, as you say, every time that a difficult decision comes up, you can always turn to your brand and those core values to basically remind you whether something should or shouldn't be done. It's as important as that. It's like, is it us or is it not us?
Yeah, it's your roadmap for everything. And yeah, if you're ever kind of pulled off track or start going around, or you just have like an internal, discussion about a certain issue, it's really helpful being able to take the different personas out of the room and just go back to, okay, is this in line with who we are? Yeah. So it's really helpful, particularly in COVID where we were, we couldn't do our events.
Yeah. And of course, for a race series, you're sort of married to that for eternity, right? It's something you just, not that you can't rebrand, but it's something you need to get right. You mentioned all the other kind of like big names in terms of, racing series out there, UTMB, Xterra, all those folks. Otilo, which is another favorite, I guess, more kind of like your league, smaller in a bit, but also quite niche and very dominant in their niche in swim running. Was there a particular brand that sort of inspired you in there? Like of all of those, is there any of these that you would hold up as kind of like, maybe someone you keep turning towards trying to model yourself after a bit more than the others?
I actually don't think there is. I think it's always been a key part of kind of our team mentality, both as founders and something we kind of instill in the whole team, is we've got to learn from everyone out there. And that's yes in the space when we look at series and endurance brands, but also, any experience. What about Starbucks? What about music festivals? What about Apple? Why do we like those brands? What is it that we can learn from those brands? So there's definitely no specific series we kind of try and align to. When I have conversations with people about Ultra X and they know little, I always use Ironman, which is actually quite a dangerous thing to do. And I always caveat it with the fact that we are not Ironman. We are not, we're not trying to be Ironman. We are Ultra X, and we are very different. And we want to be Ultra X. We don't want to be Ironman. But in terms of, I think what Ironman have done incredibly well is they have created a brand which transcends the sport. So to the extent that when you go into your office on a Monday after doing an event, you say, I did an Ironman, not I did a long distance triathlon. And that's really amazing from a branding point of view. In the same way that people talk about iPhones rather than phones. So I think, in that sense, our vision is to, in the same way you do an Ultra X event, you come and say, I did an Ultra X rather than Ultra Marathon, which is actually quite a confusing and mixed space. But yeah, we do look at all of them. We're constantly tracking UTMB movements, Ironman movements, Xterra's movements. Some of it is great and we take inspiration. Some of it we follow and we see how let's not do that. But I think it's important to, try and learn as much as possible and, and also connect with the people in the space. Like I've learned so much from speaking with other race directors and business owners, and actually particularly in the trail and ultra space, which is, very, very much a bit of a, I guess what I call a soul sport, in that a lot of people do it because they love it. They're really happy to, share stories, share experiences, share what worked well or didn't work well. And actually, I've avoided so many potential issues just because I've had a conversation with someone who's shared their story with me. And I'd like to think I'd be exactly the same if anyone's to reach out to me.
Well, one of the things that all of those guys have done, which you also followed, is having a championship. So basically, UTMB, they have their race series across the world. I think they're calling it just the World Series or something. And then Ironman obviously has all the races, but they all go back to a championship. Even the Spartan races, right? They have a championship basically, which is sort of like, where all the best athletes compete to be the Ironman world champion or the UTMB champion. And you guys have followed that format. How core is this to the project? And basically, how deliberate was it? Was it a bit of an afterthought, or was it something that from the very beginning you thought this is something we need to plan towards?
It was in the plan from day one. It was always something we thought was important. I think, our events, whilst the branding's very similar and consistent and you're going to get a consistent experience, there's no like league table. There's no like point system. So we wanted to have a unifying event, which would incentivize. 80% of our competitor base are not there to win. They're there to, do this amazing challenge and have that story to tell their grandchildren. But we knew that 10, 20% of people actually would, and actually giving them that little carrot, that something which would motivate them to potentially push a little harder or potentially come back and do another event was important. So from that perspective, we thought it was important. But I guess on the other perspective, we we genuinely believe that multi-stage racing is an awesome sport. And I think if we spoke to any of the, the business leaders or the race directors in each of these sports, I expect the real reason they have a world champs is because they want to create an event which champions the sport, which showcases the sport. And actually, I guess it's more of maybe even a marketing piece, maybe an awareness piece, but people follow the most exciting people in that sport. And if you can create an event which is, which has a great story, which is exciting to follow, which gets some of the most amazing people in this sport together, then I think that's only good for the sport as a whole. So for us, the World Championships was an opportunity to showcase all of the incredible people that do this event in a kind of like, I guess, an easier way than having them spread across a whole series. So yeah, that was kind of the initial vision. It's definitely still taking some working out. I think because our brand is so focused on accessibility, I think maybe if I was to go back and in hindsight would be to wait a couple of years and launch the World Champs when we're a bit more established and we had events which were, full and selling out. But, it's definitely an important part of our brand, and I wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't change it for the long term.
So, you've got a great thing going, you've built a great event that people love from the ground up, and you're ready to take it to the next level. But is your technology up to it? If you've been hacking your way so far using different tools for different jobs, having a so-so website and spending hours moving data back and forth from your registration platform to your email marketing provider and so on, it's time you upgraded your tech before you look into upgrading your race. With Run Signups all-in-one technology solution, you'll get all the tools you need and more all in one place to help you build a solid foundation that will help support your race's growth for years to come. Free email marketing, an awesome free custom website, a fully customizable registration experience, and awesome fundraising and participant-to-participant referral tools are just some of the things you'll be getting when you join Run Signup's industry-leading platform. With that, you'll get the resources and support you need to get you through the next stages of your growth journey and an amazing suite of race day tools to help you deliver a world-class race day experience to your participants and fans. So, to learn more about Run Signup's market-leading technology used by over 28,000 in-person, virtual, and hybrid events, and to book a free demo tailored to your needs, make sure to visit runsignup.com today. That's runsignup.com. And see what Run Signup's awesome race technology can do to take your event to the next level. Okay, now let's get back to the episode. That's definitely a very tricky space you've tried to carve for yourselves. The whole accessible ultramarathon. It's almost like an oxymoron kind of thing, right? So you're trying to basically sell events to people who are okay going out into the desert and doing like a 200-mile multi-stage race or something. But then you're also saying, yeah, come on, it's nothing much, like, anyone can do it with a bit of training kind of thing. It's a difficult thing to try and square.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's important to get right, because obviously you don't want to encourage people to not be prepared. I think the messaging has always tried to, and it's difficult to get perfect, but it's always tried to be, this is bloody hard. This is a difficult thing to compete. And I'm not going to hide that from you, but these are some of the people that have done it. You can associate with them. And actually, if you commit, you 100% are capable of doing it. So, accessibility over 5 years, my kind of definition of it and what's important to it has probably changed quite a bit. A lot of it now is around education, around providing resources, is around providing information support. I will not deny that an ultra marathon and ultra X is a really hard thing to do, but I really do genuinely believe that anyone is capable of doing it, because actually with the right preparation, it's not high intensity. It's not going to require significant power or strength. It's just about being prepared and being motivated. But you're right. It's a tricky one to get perfect. And we're constantly trying to develop the messaging to make that clear. But I think the biggest way of getting that message across is through the storytelling side of things.
I mean, it seems to be working out for you. And actually, I had a similar discussion with Amy Charity, who puts on the Steamboat Gravel event, which is, I mean, obviously they have stages, so they have, they have more accessible events within the race for people to do. But she was also pointing out that she has found openness and making the event more accessible and playing down the whole, oh, this is the toughest, this tough as that, seems to be working for people. Like even for ultra events, it seems to be a way forward to make ultra running more generally grow, which apparently, trail running is doing well, particularly on the smaller distances, but, ultra running maybe has some more issues around inclusivity and just getting more different types of people to come through the sport. Let's move on to some stuff around the challenges of putting on a race series and some of the things that are very specific to race series. One of the very interesting things you were telling me, and we sort of alluded to earlier, was repeat participation. You wouldn't be putting on a race series if you didn't count on repeat participation. I guess that's the whole bet there. What level of repeat participation do you guys get in your races?
We actually get really high. So I think I did actually dig into the numbers, but over 2 years, we've got 69% of people do a race with us within 24 months after doing their first Ultra X, which we think is pretty high. I don't actually know about, a comparable across the industry, but considering, a lot of our events are things that people do maybe once or twice a year, as a kind of high level. And they're, some of them are expensive and some of them take a week of time commitment. We consider that, pretty high. But it's always something we're kind of working on, is how can we retain, how can we, try and motivate those people that did an event with us, had a good time to come back. And what we found quite interesting is the fact that, we started with the 5-stage events, and then we had kind of 2-stage events, which were actually a bit of a stepping stone. The idea was that, okay, people would do a 2-stage event with us, and then they might a year later come back and do a 5-stage event with us. But what we've actually found is it works both ways. So actually, yes, that happens, but also a lot of people come and do the 5-stage event. It was a massive thing. It was supposed to be their big bucket list item, which they tick off and move on. But then they have a really good time and they want to do other things, and maybe they don't want to commit the same amount of time that they committed to this big challenge, but suddenly they're signed up for 3 2-day events over the course of the next year because they know they can do it. It doesn't require the same time commitment, and they've got this, organizer that they get on well with. They know that the events are going to be, a good quality, and they have a bit of a community. So yeah, it's interesting, and working out that kind of customer runner journey through your events is something we're kind of constantly trying to iterate and work on and provide. But yeah, it's an important part of the series and the brand and what we're doing.
Well, and of course, the great side of it, you mentioned, more than 2/3 of people do more than one event, is that you're keeping marketing costs down, right? I mean, you have someone who comes on, they do one event, they do another event. You spoke of sort of like lifetime value. So you're already thinking of every participant that comes in isn't worth to us just the one sign-up fee. They're worth the full lifetime value which they can provide to Ultra X, which seems to be sort of a little bit open-ended, seeing as you've only been around for a few years. I mean, there's probably like a tail to that goes into many, many years, hopefully. And you mentioned that there's things that you do, specific, deliberate things that you do to foster that repeat participation. Can you share any of these? Anything specifically that maybe other people can sort of benefit from?
Yeah, I mean, a lot's on a kind of, I guess on like a email marketing / data collection side, and that we know, who's done which event, and we kind of touch base with them after set time periods. But a lot is kind of, I guess, community focused. I've always had this potentially romantic idea that, the moment you sign down for an event, you're on that event journey. And it's not just when you turn up at the start line. But I think the thing we've tried to, I guess, even take one step further is actually, okay, say Panos, you sign down to Ultra X Jordan tomorrow. That's great. You'll get a call from a race director within a week, and you'll, get constant emails. But then after the event, you'll also get a certain series of invitations. You'll get an invitation to a film screening. You'll get an invitation to maybe a community run. You'll get an invitation to the next event. So it's kind of fostering those ongoing touch points and, providing with people opportunities to interact with the brand, which doesn't have to be commercial, but it's just, a reminder of, hey, we're here, we're kind of one big family. So far it's been, relatively successful. I think, as I say, we're always kind of learning and taking inspiration. But I think a lot of it is, it's just got to feel like you're part of the family. It's just got to feel like this is the right space. And a lot of it comes down to, the community and the connections that people do these events. It's, the constant, I think a lot of people do ultras and specifically Ultra X's because they want a challenge. They want to do a race. They want to go a long way. And the reason they come back is because of the people always. So just investing in those personal relationships over the course of the week and after the event is, I'd say, the most important retention tool any event director, any organizer can have.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because not many people think very hard about all these out of race engagement opportunities, basically. I mean, they do take a lot of time, right? I mean, like organizing any of those things, even in the leanest possible way, like a film screening that you mentioned, or, like even like a community run, it takes a lot of time. But lots of people, like particularly, people that we mentioned earlier in terms of, I guess, the competition in a very broad sense. Ironman do a lot of that. High Rocks, which is probably the most successful racing series of late, does a lot of that around the year engagement with people outside of races. It's curious to wonder what kind of, like, how you're thinking about the ROI out of that, just going back strictly to the point that, you have a small team, there's very few of you, very limited time. When you put these things on, there must be moments when you think, is this a good use of my time? Is this a good use of resources? Like, what am I getting out of this? Do you have a feel for that? Is it again like a gut thing, or is it something more calculated than that?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. It's really difficult to measure. I think there's some things we do that you can track and you can look at on a spreadsheet and you can say, yeah, that worked, that didn't. And there's some things you can do where if they're right or wrong. And you've just got to kind of trust your gut. And I think that's the risk that you take. I think things like film screenings for us or events, we say, okay, yes, this is this kind of maybe unmeasurable thing that this is an investment in retention of, people that have done our events, and we see that as really important. And if our retention continues to be high, then, maybe we're doing the right things. I think on the other side, we see these events as big marketing opportunities for us. I think, one of the things we haven't necessarily touched on is actually having a series means, I think for most events, if you look at your kind of social media traffic, website traffic, you're always going to get the most reach from an event, from putting on an event, from event weekends. So by having a number of events, we actually save money on marketing because actually we're constantly marketing the next through our events. But, doing physical events, which aren't necessarily races, we see as huge opportunities because at the end of the day, most people might not sign down. Well, I think it's a difficult leap to sign down for something which maybe costs over $1,000 or £1,000, and is a long way just because of seeing something on Instagram or seeing a race page. At the end of the day, they want to have a conversation with someone that's done it. So our events like film screenings are really our opportunities where we get people who haven't done an event with people that have done an event in the same room together and let them speak over a drink in a kind of social setting. Again, it's a really difficult one to, measure accurately. I guess you could look at the people that have come and haven't done an event and their, the sign-ups over the next, 12 months. But it's always a difficult one for us because quite often, people will hear about or first interact with UltraX, and then they'll sign up for something 6 months, a year, 18 months later, because it's that kind of commitment. We've just launched our first 2025 event, and, we already know a lot of people are kind of planning that, and we're already having questions about some of our 24 races. When are they going to be in 25? Because, it's a week of holiday. It's a big financial commitment, and it's a lot of training. So, it's a difficult one to track accurately, but I think sometimes, if you believe in your idea enough, you've just got to go for it.
Do you have a space online where basically maybe the whole UltraX participant, past and future, kind of live like a Facebook group or some kind of community online?
Yeah, we have a few, but the most active one is the competitors Facebook group. We create WhatsApp groups for each specific event, or some of the specific events, some of the larger ones. And we have like a Strava group as well. But Facebook is generally where people ask questions, interact with each other, get to know. It's it's pretty loud.
I can definitely see lots of benefits in having, say, like a group. And this is where some of the synergies of having a series come into play, because, you can have an UltraX where all of the participants across all the races are in. And it's a constant reminder, say I did the Jordan event this weekend, obviously lots of traffic and conversations about Jordan over the few weeks leading up to the event. Then things die down. Maybe another event comes up in the posts, but me as a past Jordan race participant, I'm there. So, I constantly keep getting reminders. I bring myself back to race day. Oh, wouldn't be great if I did, this other event. So yeah, that community generally, it's a constant reminder, as you say, year round, that these races are going on, and it gives an incentive to people to become repeat participants.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of delivering these events, which is a big part of this, I was really surprised to hear that you do that out of a very, very small team. What is the model? How do you, I'm guessing you don't have all of the people required in the event going out and setting up races all over the world. So how do you do it?
Yeah, work really hard. We have a very small core team of 4 people. However, we grow massively for each of the events, and we have a lot of external kind of contractors and freelancers and people in different countries. So in the UK, we manage all of our events 100% ourselves. Internationally, which is the majority of our events, we have a local partner in each of those locations, who is a contractor and who is essentially responsible for delivering X towards the event. Now that varies in each location. Unfortunately, it'd be much simpler if it didn't, but obviously some people have different expertise. In some countries, those people are literally race directors. So they might have a series of events or number of events in their country. They might organize trail running. It might be mountain biking. And they take on the kind of overall delivery, under our guidance and instruction. And in some of the events, they're much more of a kind of fixer role. So we still race direct the event, and they simply provide X amount of staff, permissions for routes, permitting, campsites, setting up of tents and things like that. So yeah, it does vary slightly, but essentially we have a local team, operating in each of our, locations, which helps us, because whilst at a very high level, our operational plan is similar. There's always local intricacies with regard to how you get permissions, who you get permissions from, how you set up stuff, what tents you use, all that kind of stuff.
It must be quite scary having a delivery partner and having to depend on someone to help you direct a race where you put your brand on it is, stressful enough. Having those partners be, hundreds and thousands of miles away in completely different cultures with completely different laws and all of that. It must be, quite scary. How do you vet partners to make sure that they don't, let you down at the last minute?
Yeah, it is definitely. And we've had, difficulties in the past before. I think the way I see it is, you know, in the same way as if you are hiring an employee to do an important role within your company, you know, you would spend a lot of time interviewing, you would spend a lot of time vetting, you check their credentials, you check their CV, you might get some references. And so essentially we go through this process whenever we go to a new location, where we usually speak to a number of potential partners, usually starting with speaking with any contact that we have in the country and getting recommendations. And then essentially we require them to kind of pitch to us on a proposal and confirm certain things. And actually, by the time we get to a position where we're going to essentially go and visit them in country, check out the route, meet their team, etc., we're actually incredibly comfortable that they've got the answers to all the questions, because we spent enough time on due diligence, on calls, and actually, you know, at the end of the day, we're still the team on the ground during the event. Every single event, there's 6 to 8 people that have done a number of Ultra X events managing the whole team. We bring in a medical team from the UK. We bring in a therapist team from the UK. So all of the kind of senior management at the event are still our team who manage the event. It's really just the physical logistics of moving stuff around, and the permissions, which we rely on the local team.
I mean, it sounds pretty expensive, all that stuff, right? I mean, just packing whole teams from the UK, you mentioned medical stuff, all of that, going out for events that initially, I guess, have only maybe like a few dozen people in them, at least your original events. Funding all of this must be quite challenging as well.
Yes. Yeah, particularly when you can't put on events for a couple of years. Essentially, I mean, we're a pretty lean team, as I say. You know, we don't have really much overhead at all. We spend very little on marketing, because we try and do it as efficiently as we can, and use our events to market. I guess the benefit of the events model is that obviously there's an initial outlay, an initial investment for every single event, in terms of setup costs, deposits, etc. But actually, once you are comfortable with the delivery of the event, then you get income upfront, cash upfront, which then allows you to ideally pay for all your costs, before the event, or in line with when the event happens. So, yeah, from a kind of cash flow perspective, that's generally how it works. And having a number of events in the future does definitely help that. I mean, we have to be incredibly budget focused and driven, and keep a close eye on everything, because, yeah, it's very easy, particularly with a great number of events, to get in the wrong place or the wrong side of the balance sheet or whatever.
Oh yeah, definitely. Is it then the case that maybe, you know, at this point in time, you've advertised 3 or 4 events may be open for registrations, and the money coming in through all these 3 or 4 events may go into maybe the next event, and then sort of like, is it this kind of like bootstrapping, where basically the money from open events go into financing this event, and then hopefully you add more and more events with larger size, and this kind of thing keeps financing itself through the upfront cash flows you get?
Essentially, yeah. I think the important thing is that you're always in a position where you have the funding to deliver the events that you've committed to as an organizer. You know, I think there's many events companies, Tough Mudder being a good example, that, you know, they lost sight of their cash flows and started delivering events based on money coming in for events down the line and down the line and down the line. And then when those events didn't happen, or when sales weren't as expected, they couldn't deliver. So I think the important thing is to, you know, have, good budgets, which you're confident are gonna be right, which is, often challenging when you're operating in weird and wonderful parts of the world, with a buffer. And then, providing you are making a bit of a profit on those events, then you can reinvest that cash into future event delivery. But at the same time, it's definitely, I mean, it's the limiter for kind of growth. And we have launched a number of events this year, but we've also had to cancel a number of events this year. We've kind of changed our portfolio a little bit this year. And yeah, I think that is one of the kind of controlling forces in that the speed at which we, grow the series and grow the number of events we offer.
Yeah, because I meant to ask, has there ever been a case of advertising an event, not getting the kind of response you would have hoped for and having to cancel it? It sounds like, you want to stay quite agile around these kinds of things and not marry a concept too much.
We've never had to cancel an event because of sales being poor. We've had events which have been loss making. And we've always been, we say we're going to put on an event. We're going to put on an event. If there's a few less people, we feel like we've got an obligation. We have cancelled several events, but those have been operational reasons or because of COVID. So it's a difficult one. I guess one of the things about, or one of the potential benefits about having a series, and particularly a number of quite different format events or different events in different locations, is that you've kind of got a bit of a natural hedge in that, you don't have all your eggs in one basket. And actually, if as a business, one location is suddenly less popular for whatever reason, then actually, hopefully you have another event which might be up and might be down. And, every year, 6 months, we sit down and we, put some numbers together of what we think each event's gonna come to. And there'll always be some which are down, but there'll also usually be one or two which are up. So that helps from an events perspective. I feel if you've got one race, particularly for us, where some of them are in a kind of politically sensitive or geographical challenging areas where suddenly it's not able to go ahead, then, that's a massive business impact.
Yeah, I guess that's the big risk for a series like yours, because I think personally, looking at this, the probability that a race might fail because of lack of interest, given the locations you put them on, which, have a huge exotic appeal to your core audience, which is UK based participants. I think that's very slim. But on the other hand, with exotic sometimes come other risks around, like political instability and other stuff. Like, you just don't know, particularly, as we're recording this with everything happening in the world, you just don't know what might be around the corner in terms, some of you look like Jordan is in a very precarious position on the globe right now. So, you just don't know whether some of those locations may just stop being safe destinations for races soon enough.
Yeah. I mean, we had an event in Sri Lanka, which happened twice, and most amazing event, beautiful route, incredible partners. We loved it, but, the country's a bit of a mess. And, we've got to be in a situation where we believe that we can put on events securely in 18 months time. And trying to predict that is not easy. So yeah, we had to make the decision to pull out of Sri Lanka, and I think it's quite unlikely that we go back, despite basically we've actually still got some tents out there, despite being completely set up for it and having invested quite a lot of time in it.
Now that you're in this stage where you're how many events are you putting on right now?
Next year will be 14 locations, like 19 races.
Okay. So now that you're in this kind of stage where I would have thought the concept is at least partly tested. I mean, it seems to be doing great and to be getting a good response from people. Has it crossed your minds, sort of addressing you collectively as sort of like co-founders, to maybe try and spike the growth a little bit, maybe through some debt financing, equity financing, anything of that sort, just to take it to the next stage?
Yeah, I think we've definitely thought about it. We kind of had a few discussions earlier this year, when we were kind of, in a tricky position coming out of COVID. I think we care a lot about the brand, and we care a lot about the direction of the business. And I think it's important for us that we maintain control. So, and at the moment, we're not in a position where we need to take on board money. And also, we don't really want to grow too aggressively. I think, as you kind of touched on, we spent a lot of time on the brand at the beginning, and the brand is everything. The success and failure of Ultra X is all about continuing to deliver quality events, not growing too quickly, not growing too fast. And I think, we're still, yes, we've got a good number of races now, but we're still very much learning. We're still very much getting better the whole time. And, I don't think we're at the stage yet where it's just as simple as saying, okay, let's do this across 50 places because we've got this proven model. We'd much rather, grow our events, at a rate which we feel comfortable with, know that we can continue or feel confident that we can continue to put on a really good experience for every single one of those runners. And as a person, not just as a number doing our events. And kind of see where we go. But, not to say never, but, at the moment, we're pretty content with the way we see us growing without taking on additional finance in the next, 3 to 5 years.
And what is that rate currently, that sort of the organic growth rate that you guys are looking for? Is it the 2 races per year that you mentioned at the start?
Yeah, give or take. I mean, this year was quite exceptional. This year we launched 11 races and 6 locations because, as I said, during COVID, we were quite reactive and there was a lot of things we couldn't do. And there were some things we could do. So we kind of moved a little bit away from what we had planned in terms of event locations, ended up doing a lot of things in the UK. And coming out of it and particularly into this year, we realized that actually our event portfolio wasn't exactly what we wanted it to be, in terms of we wanted to be focused on bucket list locations, destination events. And whilst I love the UK, not just a series of UK based ultras, because that's not our USP. That's not our differentiator. So, we pulled out of a couple of locations, which was, actually quite difficult, this year, bit of a shame. But we've also launched a number of events. So actually the net gain this year has been 2 or 3 events. And I don't see us, I think we'll launch 1 in 25 for 25, but actually I don't see us launching any more of the next 24 months, until 26, just because we want to, this year's been very focused on the operational side, and next year and the year after, we really want to kind of, to focus on the marketing side and get those competitive numbers up, and then kind of review it. But, I see us then getting back to growing the number of events, providing we can, attract the competitors that we want.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because at this stage, I guess it's much better from an economics point of view to beef up numbers on locations that you already do races, rather than, go out, have another startup cost for another location, scouting, the discussions with the local partners, all of that kind of stuff. So a little bit of a consolidation kind of stage, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always going to make more sense from a purely financial basis to have one event with 1,000 runners than 2 events with 500 runners. Just because of the way event costs work, and that a large percentage of them are going to be fixed. That's not to say there's benefits for having a number of events, because you're getting access to different markets. You might be getting extra awareness. You might be attracting people that wouldn't have come to a different location. And I think for us, we were always quite, it was always very important to us that we did have a number of races, that we were seen as a series that we were kind of credible in that respect. But I think, over the next 24 months, as I say, our focus is on, actually delivering those events and growing the size of those events rather than putting on more.
One of the things that you mentioned to me the other day, which I thought was super interesting about being in the business of putting on a series of events that are basically all the same event, just in different locations, is the ability to iterate quite quickly, which I always thought is one of the really kind of frustrating things about building a race management business, in that, you do your Turkey Trot 2023 race, then, you debrief, you learn a couple of stuff, then you need to wait for your Turkey Trot 2024 race, right? Which is like the whole cycle of putting on an event, because it's usually just an annual thing. It seems to improve and grow so slowly, because you don't get feedback that often, which is not an issue you guys have at the series level, because you get feedback from every single event that you can apply to other races.
Yeah, it's that whole Jeff Bezos mentality, isn't it? You gotta fail faster than everyone else. I think we've always been an incredibly hungry team to grow, and really interested in kind of learning from our mistakes and getting better the whole time, having that kind of growth mindset. So having a number of events and then sitting down after every single event and debriefing, and actually having a format which is similar across everything means that every race we do, there'll be something which we can take out and implement, usually within 4 or 5 weeks, rather than waiting an entire year to do it again. Which I think means just generally in terms of whether it's kind of from a marketing side or an operational side or just an event experience side, we can improve our competitor experience in our operational plan much quicker than we could if we had one opportunity to learn once a year.
Where that sort of breaks down a little bit, which surprised me, was on sponsorship, where I would have thought that basically the critical mass of having all of these events would be quite helpful for leveraging sponsorship, because essentially, you can go to a sponsor with all your Ultra X events and say, I've got any number of races with a total sum of participants, which is something significant to get people interested. But that's not quite how it works, is it?
Yeah, it's incredibly complicated, and I'm by no means an expert at this. We're still in our early days, and we've been so focused on the products that we offer, the events that we offer, that actually sponsorship until really this year has been a little bit of an afterthought. But what we have found challenging is actually getting, that brand message across very clearly because of the number of events. I think a lot of brands are used to working specifically with one event or one location. Because we have 14 countries essentially with different audiences, and in different, parts of the world. Often we go to a brand and we say, hey, we're a UK based company. We've got a predominantly UK based audience, and this is our opportunity to market to, but we've got this event in Jordan or this event in Sri Lanka. And then suddenly it becomes a different budget holder or a different team, an international or a global. And that suddenly means you've got to change your offering. And actually the way most of our kind of sponsorship or partnership relationships go now is actually we target specific events. So I think one of our, I'd say, big learnings, and I think it's definitely something to consider for organizers that are, putting on series is, each individual event has to have a reason for existing, and not just because it falls into the series. And whether that's, it's a great event experience, or whether you can say to a sponsor, can partner with this specific event. It kind of has to work on a standalone basis. So yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a challenge attracting those kind of series sponsors rather than those specific individual sponsors. But also I do think there's an opportunity there. It's just, we're still early in the journey.
So basically you're saying that your sponsorship strategy is essentially now an event by event kind of like sponsorship. There's no synergies there or kind of like scale mass thing to leverage having the series behind you. It's just every event, separate sponsorship roster.
Yeah, we have kind of almost like 3 levels. One is global, which we found is challenging because of the number of events in different locations. Number 2 is regional. So that might be event specific, or it might be, we have a number of events in the UK. So UK, series partner, which for example, ASICS is our UK series partner and has been for this year, at the moment. And then individual, which is the standalone events. And that is where we can say, come along, be part of the event village, get involved more that way in the specific email comms. But yeah, it's something we're kind of working out what brands and partners wants. And actually, I think the environment seems to be changing quite a bit in that we're finding that, brands seem to be more interested in working with event organizers as a kind of almost as an influencer, because they want to link up the brand's audience with their audience, and they want to do a specific campaign rather than necessarily, I want to be headline sponsor of Ultrex Scotland. We want to leverage your community to get this message across. So it's about, I guess, being a bit flexible as an organizer, listening to what, brands want, what companies want, and seeing, what can work and what can't.
Yeah, which I guess is harder for organizers. I mean, it sounds like, it works great for brands who don't want to commit to the traditional sponsorship kind of role, but it's harder for organizers because it's sort of very unpredictable when these things come around, the whole branding partnership or like audience leverage type campaigns that these guys want.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also, this, it's also an opportunity because I think, as a runner personally, and as I speak to lots of our audience, like there's nothing more, boring than being pushed like a typical, a backpack partner or a nutrition partner or whatever. And actually, if you can do an engaging campaign with a brand, whether it's in association with an event or in the build up, actually it's something that really adds value to your events. So I do think there's, real opportunities there to actually collaborate a bit more with brands in the kind of, event process and the competitor experience, and actually see it as not just, a means to an end to fill up this gap. But it's a way that actually this can add value to our competitor experience and improve the event offering.
Now, in terms of other revenue streams beyond just registrations and potentially sponsorship, is there anything else that moves the needle for you guys? I saw you had some kind of like merchandise on the site, or like, is there anything else that you do maybe outside of race days that generates revenue for the series? Anything that may be coming down the line?
So essentially, race entry fees are still, basically everything for us. We have kind of brand sponsorships, and then we have merch, which you've kind of already alluded to, which is, t-shirts and caps. We've started, in some of our locations, we work with, local organizers to do kind of, I guess, travel packages. So for example, Rwanda or Jordan, there's an opportunity to go and do, activities in the location, which we'll then pre-organize for you and allow you to stay with the group of the event, which means if you're traveling to, one of these places by yourself and want to experience the event, you can stay, the country, you can stay in that. And I guess the final kind of revenue stream we have, which is, I guess, slightly probably comes under sponsorship, but is a kind of tourism board. So not necessarily, brands, because, as so many, particularly because we are a very international audience, in most of our locations, we will bring in, a good amount of people that will spend, 3, 4, 5 days in the location. So, if they're spending money in that location, it makes a lot of sense to work with tourism boards where we can promote their location. So, increasingly we're seeing, people approach us saying, "Oh, can you do an event here? We will support you to do the event here," whether it's logistical or financial, which, is something we kind of bear in mind. But I think, what's always important to, be conscious of is, it's got to still be a great event. It can't just be a tourism board with a load of cash, which, I think there's probably a couple of event organizers out there which go down the other route. So, important to get it right. But yeah, I think we always will be in a position where, race entry fees is the driving one.
But it's a great place to find yourself having reverse inquiries, sort of, right? I mean, getting people interested in bringing your series to their part of the world, and then I guess you get to choose, which is always a great position to find yourself in. I want to wrap up with something that's probably it's not an immediate concern of yours, but it always is there in the background for most people running a race management business in general, and I'm guessing particularly one who does a series, which you would have had lots of things planned out, which is exiting the business. And again, not something that's obviously front of mind over the next few years, but how are you thinking this is going to end for you guys at Ultra X, the series? Are you thinking maybe that you're going to be selling this at some time over the next few years? When does this become sellable, you think, just going into the business of it a little bit in terms of size and scale? Who might be a potential partner? Have you thought about any of these things?
I think it's always there in the back of your head. I think I expect most people who say no to that technical question are probably lying. I genuinely love what I do. And I would love to be CEO of UltraX in 20, 25 years time and be doing this. Like, I get to travel around the world to amazing places, meeting incredible people and putting medals around their necks, which is something, which is a great lifestyle. At the moment, it's quite hard work and I don't take much out of it. So of course, if the right person came and approached us in, 5-10 years time and said, hey, I'd like to take over a good chunk of your shares, and you can carry on in a position which means that you can guide this company to be the company that you want it to, I think it'd be really difficult to say no to. But there's no specific financial, okay, we need to get to this in 3 years to make sure we're in an exitable position. We do have some investors who put some money in, 4 years ago now, which kind of helped us start, and they will want a return on their investment at some point. And I'm conscious of that. And I think it's important that, we aim to return them. But, Jamie and I still own almost the whole of the company. And so, yeah, we want to, make sure that it goes in the direction that, we want it to. But I think, to say that, a bit of security and safety at some point, I'd turn that down. It'd be difficult to say no to, but who knows?
Do you think there is a minimum kind of like size that would be required to make this interesting for a potential buyer, of the buyer that you may think might want to have a look at this?
I don't know if the size, I think you've got to have you've got to have a concept which works and can be proved. I think the key thing, if you're looking to sell, is something which is easily scalable and a model which can grow, and probably without my involvement, if that's really what someone wants to take on. So, I think I don't think there's a number of races which suddenly means that it's, exciting. I think being profitable is something, being sustainable is another thing, and being scalable is probably, the three key things. But yeah, I think it's difficult to put a specific number on it, without, putting a finger in the air.
And what's the next race you're heading out to now? Morocco, you're staying at home. What's the next one?
We got Madeira in, 3 weeks time, 2.5 weeks time, which will be our final event of the season. A bit of winter sun.
Awesome. Do you get some rest over the Christmas holidays, or is it still events around there?
Yeah, we've got, our next event after Madeira will be Tanzania at the end of February. So we've kind of got three months, of downtime before it all kicks off again.
I mean, you don't look like you need it, but, I hope you have a good rest over the holidays, you and Jamie. Like, it's remarkable what you guys do with a team of 4. Well, you, Jamie, and the other 2 folks. So you should definitely have a rest. I want to thank you very much for today's discussion. It's been very helpful having a look into the whole race series business. I hope you enjoyed it.
No, it's been great. Thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you for coming on. All the best with Morocco and Madeira and all of your other races. I'll definitely be following the growth of the series from LinkedIn and other places. So thanks again for coming on. Thanks to everyone listening in, and we'll see you guys on our next podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode on building a race series with UltraX co-founder Sam Heward. You can find more resources on anything and everything related to race directing on our website, racedirectorshq.com. You can also share your thoughts about some of the things discussed in today's episode or anything else in our Facebook group, Race Directors Hub. Many thanks again to our awesome podcast sponsor, RunSignup, for sponsoring today's episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite player. And do check out our podcast back catalog for more great content like this. Until our next episode, take care and keep putting on amazing races.